back. Obviously, last week we had no show. Tried to make it work, but with the insanity that was the Major League Baseball playoffs, I had the fortune of being at one of those games with Austin. We were able to get some really good reactions, good content out of it. It just didn't quite work out. This is the first week that we'd taken off, though I didn't really say we didn't have a show in a long time. But we're back with Logan Reever this week. You've seen him on FanDuel Sports, the new Detroit sports reporter covering Tigers, covering Wings, covering Pistons. We're going to be seeing him all over your television screens. He's a Detroiter now, and he's made the time to hop on Chris and Company today. First time guest, which is always wonderful to see. So we're going to get to our interview here in just a second. Just a few show notes at Castellani 2014 on Twitter. We are on YouTube as well, on TikTok also. Following is growing there very rapidly. You can find us in audio form on Apple Podcasts. You can find us in audio form on Spotify. And of course, CastellaniContent.com is being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. All right. Short intro, but you guys come here for the interviews. You come here for the subjects. And our subject this week is Logan Reever. Let's get to it. Logan Reever joining the program today on Chris and Company. We're talking off the air. It's taken a minute, but obviously a hectic time in the world of Detroit sports. A hectic time in your life as you're, talk about kind of being thrust into a situation here, man. I mean, I feel like you were dropped into the middle of a playoff chase, of something of a collapse, of a playoff race, and now you had to endure the 15-inning marathon that was the Game 5 of the ALDS. I guess just to kind of start off, how have you adjusted? How are you feeling right now? Where's the energy level at?
Endure is probably something I'll give more terms to the diehard Tigers fans that have experienced this their whole lives. I'm just thrown into this the second half, slowly learning about sort of the ins and outs of it all because, it's been a whirlwind in a great way. I joined about, I would say, late July-ish, kind of while in the middle of this, this huge high. They have that 15.5 game lead right around the same time that I joined, to the point where when they lost, I think it was 11 out of 12, people are like, what's going on with this guy? Like, is this guy, this guy? He joins and then immediately things go sour. But no, everyone's been so welcoming. It's really cool to see a city where, like, there's fan bases that, they care, but this is like you live and breathe with every single pitch. And I think, as devastating as that 15-inning game was, I think to see the amount of investment and care that fans have for every single pitch and move, and that's just not a thing in every city. And I can speak to that because I popped around quite a bit in my career. So even though it wasn't maybe the most fun introduction to sort of seeing where that passion exudes from, it was enlightening, to say the least, Chris.
First, I can imagine. No, it's as a learning experience, it's a good situation to be thrust into. And even while I think I even tweeted this during the game, but it's like, man, it's too bad I had a rooting interest in that game, because if I could just watch it as an outsider, I would have been so incredibly entertained, and with minus the stress and everything. But as you're watching as a fan, it's torture. But obviously, an incredible experience to kind of stay up for it, get through it. And you brought up the fact that you've bounced around, and I do want to talk about that, kind of your journey here, because I saw that you this is something I know a little bit about, but you Emerson College graduate, which for people who don't know, kind of a pretty star-studded cast of people that have come from there. I mean, whether it's comedians, I know Bill Burr went there, Dennis Leary went there, Henry Winkler.
We got some. Jay Leno was there for a semester and then he dropped out, but then people claim him as if he was their own. So there's some people here and there.
Dude, I went to CMU for 3 years and we still claim JJ Watt. So I think at this point, like, we're, if you step foot on campus, you're considered part of the fraternity there.
If you sent a Google search once about the college, they will claim you at a certain, but they're like, can you please speak at graduation? We know you once thought about us. That's
exactly right. How long had your plan been to be in sports broadcasting in some capacity?
Oh, since I was literally, my parents tell this story a lot, but like from my first memory on, I would say probably around like 3 or 4 years old, it was, and it's always specifically with baseball looking back. It's actually funny how full circle everything is. Like, I think my parents still have the scrapbooks of just like creating box scores and playing out imaginary games in my front yard with just myself, of course. Like the neighbors would be walking by and they're like, is that kid mentally right? Like what is going on with that? And it just for hours and hours. And so always had a huge imagination. But then I think all of us that are in this obviously wanted to play because like that was the initial fascination. And then you get to a certain point in life and you're like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the path of, I'm not the best at this, but I still want to make this my world. And I think you speak to a lot of people who will say that they kind of get that fix and that thrill of as if they were playing through broadcasting because it really is such a childlike passion. And I think for me, sort of along the timeline of maybe high school, like I did stuff like morning announcements and just like things to introduce. And then I found out more about Emerson's extracurriculars and the sports broadcasting part. And then it's actually really crazy because when I was in high school, I was like, I really want to be like on First Take or like Skip Bayless and these people. And I look back at it now, I'm like, dude, what was I thinking? Like, I just wanted to be in a career where I was like yelling at people about a take over that. So it's just, it's funny how the years go by and sort of your priorities change. But I always knew that I wanted to be in a place where it really mattered and doing it on a big stage with people that care a lot about it. And so when the opening for this position came up, I think so much of it was like, yes, because this is a place that is so just entrenched in history. And like I said before, they care so much. And it doesn't hurt that the team is literally incredible on top of it. And all the people that I spoke with over the course of not just the interview process, but, they exuded a lot of the same energy and passion for this that I do. So it was a no-brainer in terms of that. But, I've wanted to do this my entire life, which is why it's really cool to kind of look back on the childhood version of myself and be like, damn, dude, you're really at the spot right now. So everything has been a blessing since that moment.
I think the coolest, and there's definitely negatives to this as well, but one of the coolest things about
I'm very well aware.
But one of the coolest things about this is how much of it is documented and that you can go back and you can witness the growth through what you do and what you create. And people who follow me know that like I started doing content on YouTube when I was 12 years old, like reviewing movies, and that stuff is still out there. There's something I have called the Castellani Vault, which is just full of like old YouTube and like sports broadcasting stuff that I did in high school. And so I have to ask, like, with you, is there like cutting room floor, like hours of like air checks or stuff that you've done that will never see the light of day that is maybe like somewhere on social media?
Literally so bad. You know what's funny? The other day, because on my Google Drive, and I feel like those Google Drives, because when your parents first make you like make an email, it's almost like an AIM. It's like the worst possible like name and memories that you can conjure up at the same time. And so you kind of have and obviously it's like a time capsule. You want to look back on it, but like some of my first broadcasts, I had like a chin strap beard with like no mustache, and just thinking that was like the epitome of what like being cool and everything was so forced. But it's funny because you can see the initial grains of like who you want to be down the line, but just no clue what you're doing whatsoever. So I'm sure I will share that at some point down the line. But it's funny, man, because you can just see how bad you kind of end up wanting to do the job and like the passion is there. But my God, the things that were coming out of my mouth are just like the approach to it all should be illegal. Brutal with it all.
Right. Yeah. But that's part of the growth though, is that like, I think that if you're looking at something you made 10 years ago and it's not much different than what you're doing now, then I feel like you're doing something wrong. Like there has to be like evolution with everything that you create. Do you feel like, and I don't think I've ever asked anyone this question, but do you feel like it being, and I'll use heavy air quotes here, does being cool matter less the older you get? Like, does it become less important with the job and more so become about just staying knowledgeable, building relationships, networking? Or is there a certain part of you that always wants to kind of be on the in, so to speak, with how you communicate with people?
It's funny because there's and maybe this is a deeper comment. This industry, it's so 50-50. I like to say this a lot. There's people who want to be on TV, and then there's people that happen to be on TV.
Yes.
And I think that there's such a drastic difference in both approaches. And I think even talking about sort of the initial seeds of like who, when you first start in broadcast, like you want things to come off a certain way. You're like, I want to do this, this, and this, so that way it comes off like this. And the second that you let that go is the second that you start having success. Like, I feel like not even just professionally, but just in my personal life, as soon as you stop trying to be cool, like it leads to success. Because I found the number one thing that people gravitate to in life, this industry, whatever, is authenticity.
Yes.
And in any single second that you sort of are trying to make something come off a certain way. And I very much did that early in my career where I was like, you know, because say for instance, like growing up watching Stuart Scott Van Pelt, these guys, and it's just, you're so enamored with them to the point where it's like, I have to come off a certain way so that way I am them. And as soon as you realize and let that go, it's like, that's what people actually want to see. And so it's the biggest cliche, and like the biggest piece of advice I got was super early on when I was in college, because I was doing a lot of like, hey, I want to resonate with this part, or I want this line to come off a certain way, or I want to be funny here. Literally people coaching me have just been like, dude, just be yourself, because it's as old as time, but people will sense that. And I very much can sense people in this city can sense that too. Like if you're trying to come off a certain line or be funny in this spot, when it's like, it's so forced, that's going to end up having the adverse result as a saying things too. And it's funny because you brought up sort of the early YouTube page stuff. Like the number one, like a couple of people have asked for advice, which I think is kind of hilarious looking back, because it's like now I'm at the point where it's like I had no idea what I was doing for so long, and now it's like, hey, how did you get to this point? And like, dude, I don't even know at some time. It's like I just like look around. But it's funny when you bring up the YouTube pages and all that, because you talk about Emerson, and I'm so grateful that I went there because of, you know, it gave me my best friends. Like my college experience was amazing, and I wouldn't trade a second of it. But in terms of the professional stuff, like this job is so different now. You don't necessarily even need to go to school for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's great to have the journalistic background and to know the ethics, and like that's stuff I'll always carry with me. But in terms of getting a credential to these games and covering these teams, you can get enough of a YouTube following tomorrow and be in the same exact spot that a lot of us are. So when I was coming up, there was always just one road to get to this point. Local news, which I ended up doing for 8 years in 4 different spots. And that was sort of the foot in the door and the only thing you can do. And now, honestly, to the point where sometimes I wonder, I'm like, sure, I can give advice, but like you can carve out your own path like nobody else. Like who cares what I think? Like if you can carve out whatever way it is to get to this point, like props to you, because there are so many more outlets in sort of avenues to get to this spot and to cover your favorite teams. It's incredible, honestly.
It's hard to crack into, but I would say that there's much more versatility, like you brought up, than there was Definitely. A decade or two ago in terms of the route that you can take, whether it's through content, through YouTube, what have you. And you mentioned authenticity, which I think is such an important thing, because like there's this thing in animation called the uncanny valley, like I
bring that up a lot, actually.
Oh, do you really? Yeah. I think that exists in some way with just like regular content and stuff that people put on the internet, where it's, even if something appears completely authentic, there's a part of your brain that can kind of identify when it is versus when it isn't. And the guys who are the people that are the ones who stick, the ones who stay, the ones who kind of continue to grow and build a following. I think that you've mentioned the ESPN era a few times. I want to like we're probably around the same age, so we grew up in, I would say, the heyday of ESPN, or at least the SportsCenter heyday, where it was not just SportsCenter, but like the shows around SportsCenter. And so I didn't expect to ask this, but since you kind of brought up that era, if there's one canceled ESPN show that you could bring back, which one would you pick?
You know what I really loved, and it's just kind of becoming, I don't want to say a lost art. I always really loved sports reporters on Sunday morning. Yeah. I feel like that was always the top tier, because it was in a lot of ways, like everything's a round table now. And you just kind of have a lot of people who are being loud just to be heard. Whereas that show was so good because there was insight with it, and all of the guys were so knowledgeable. And it was never debate, though. It was always you were learning something as a result of it, and it was still captivating television. And I think because people have sort of the shortest attention spans they've ever had, if somebody isn't being loud or sort of over the top, you're not necessarily grabbing them in, which is just the reality of it. It's just it's actually really sad because I feel like in a lot of ways you see these big networks and they're kind of leaning away towards those guys who had that insight, and those big J journalists, for the lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And, it's going with, and there's nothing wrong with it going towards more people with followings and those influencers. But yeah, I think it's going to be rare to find a show that had that sort of magnitude that one did.
That's a great pick and that was an era before we kind of knew what this was, where before there were personalities, it's let's have the journalists on, because that's what those guys were. Whether it was
they were still great personalities too.
And they were still great. Yeah,
over the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they came in as as writers, as I mean, like Mike Lupica, Mitch Albom, these guys were very famous, and Albom obviously still is. So that's a good pick. I remember I grew up, like, some of my earliest memories of just knowing. You remember Stump the Schwab?
Yeah, well, yeah, there was the originality. It's actually really sad now because the originality then was so, like, I feel like now we just have the same cookie cutter for like every single show in some way, shape, or form. And even like an example like that was, it's so foreign to what you see on TV, something as simple as that.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the internet replaced that. Like, you'd see a show like that on the internet nowadays. You wouldn't see it on regular ESPN 7 to 7:30, like in the prime time on weekdays. So like the parameters obviously have changed a bunch. I was kind of looking through your resume, and one thing that stood out, obviously, a lot of time in Massachusetts, but a lot of time doing Patriot stuff. During, to say their heyday, they had a 20-year heyday essentially. During a 2-decade run where the AFC at the very least ran through them pretty much every year, and anytime I have a chance to ask about that era or people covered that era, I try to, because we're getting farther removed from it. Brady's last year there was 19. But there's still this, as the kids say, aura, but even beyond that, this mystery kind of to that era with Belichick and how, tightly lipped he could be and how much he kind of played things close to the chest. And I feel like there were points where it might have been frustrating to cover them because despite the success, there may not have been a whole lot of accessibility. I don't want to speak for you, just kind of asking generally, like, what was your experience like with, writing about and covering the Patriots when you did?
Well, that was a lot more. So that was pretty much along. So I was born in New Hampshire and my dad worked in Boston for a bunch of years. So at its core, like, I grew up a diehard Boston sports fan. So, that's just the reality of it too. So that was more following that the entire way. And then when I went to college back, because I grew up in South Florida, but I went to college in Boston, and with my first experience, like all of my first internships were with that, covering games at Gillette. So along the line, and a lot of the things I did in college were based on that too. And so those internships and that early experience was huge. I'm sure there's people, full on covering it. A lot of the writers there probably speak to it a little bit better. But being in that environment, trust me, I grew up. It's funny because it gave me a lot of, first off, I knew I was spoiled, especially as a fan. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, that fan base, and sometimes, how you get frustrated sometimes with your own fan base where it's like, no, that doesn't represent what, we feel, or like this person doesn't do that. Sometimes I'm like, dude, it's not, you got to be, the number one thing I say in life is the most important quality is to be self-aware. Like, you can have issues, you can have problems, you can, be not the best. If you're self-aware, that is like half of the problem, because then it's at least like, you're checking your own box and you're checking yourself at a certain point. But no, it really, for a team to be dominant that long, there has to be structure behind it too. And I think even a great example is what Dan Campbell came in with last night after the Branch play, where it's just immediately like, hey, we don't stand for that. He shouldn't have done that. Like, accountability to it. And it's a little thing, but you'd be surprised how that goes a long way in the scheme of things, because it's like the second that you don't check somebody like that, that's when things, you take a small thing and it can become a big thing. And I think it sort of reiterizes the culture behind it. And I think that that's what something, if you're going to have a run for that long, which the Lions are obviously hoping to have a run for a fifth of that time at a certain point, just because the Patriots one was so long. It's little things like that. And it's little things that you don't see over the course of, like, you think you just see Brady and Belichick meeting over the course of, throughout the season and stuff like that. It's such little intangibles that lead to such long-term success, and accountability in any facet is going to be the thing that keeps it along. So it's funny to see that in teams now, because it's like, oh, we'll never see another run like that. There's things that we saw probably 10, 15, 20 years ago that we were like, we'll probably never see that again. We even said we'll never see another run like that. The Chiefs then create a dynasty literally immediately after they do. And so it's funny because we use that term a lot, like this will never be seen. We're going to see things that we see things come. The Mariners Tigers, we've pretty much never seen a game to that magnitude. So there's always ways that we're breaking new ground on things, and we're getting to new tiers of sport. And so just a small example of that, but it's funny. You look around and sort of see those first inklings of how a culture got to be the way that it is. Mm-hmm. So you still see it around other teams in sports. So yeah, it was special what they did, but I have a funny feeling that along the way, we're going to be saying like, wow, we've never seen anything like this for somebody else too.
I think what people forget sometimes is that football in the grand scheme of things is a pretty new game. I mean, we've had, not even 60 Super Bowls yet. And obviously, of course, the sport as a whole existed before that. But I feel like the modern age of football is still relatively young. It's not like baseball where you can go back to the late 1800s and find numbers and statistics and, different World Series. Obviously, that game's evolved as well. But I feel like we're still kind of in the early stages of figuring out exactly what this game is, as strange as that is to say. I think the other big thing too, and look, obviously you have a quarterback to the level of Brady, things are going to last a long time. But I just think with any great coach or any great program, organization, what have you, I think the ability to adapt is so important, just because I think that with every great team, the one thing that you're going to get is every other team's best shot and a whole league of teams that are trying to figure out how to beat you. And sometimes the book is out and it's up to you to change, to adjust. I mean, in the early part of that era with Brady, those were tremendous defensive teams. And then as he kind of progressed, the offenses got better. They got more explosive. They had Gronk. They used the 2 tight end sets. Like, it was a much different regime over time, despite having a lot of the same guys. I got to ask somebody who grew up as a Boston sports fan this, because it's become a national story. But what's your assessment of this whole Belichick thing at UNC? Like, what do you make of it? Is it sad to you? Is it surprising to you? What do you think?
Sad is one way to put. I mean, there's probably so much that's going on behind closed doors, especially with the girlfriend situation, and just like how, I feel like it's almost a disservice to speak to it fully because of that, because I'm sure there's a lot of, and you probably know this too. It's whenever you see a story, like a big national story, like we think we have all, like it's like an iceberg. You've only seen a small percentage of truly all the things going down. And like the stuff that gets reported, it's very telling, but 9 times out of 10, there's so much more that they didn't choose to report, or because it could have been more damning on this front or that front. But it's interesting you talk about sort of the sustained run of it all. Like, yes, things have not gone well since that point, and it was awful his last year with the Patriots and just the culture behind it. But looking back, like those first 3 Super Bowls the Patriots had, like, it was game manager is like Tom Brady was there over the course of the first part of the run, and sort of he slowly developed into the point where they get towards those 07, 08 teams, and they finally surround him with weapons. And then he's more accountable and sort of can get more credit for the last 3 Super Bowls that they end up getting. But it was a marriage. And that's why even the debate sometimes of who was more important, Brady or Belichick, like Tom has talked about this a lot, that he could not have gotten to where he was without Belichick too. Mm-hmm. But we live in a society where everyone's like, who gets the credit? Like everyone they want a black and white answer, and there's no nuance to it, and there's no meeting in the middle in any way, shape, or form. So I choose to look at it more of that in terms of the credit of that dynasty. But in terms of what's going on at UNC, it's only weird because, Belichick was so, didn't want to deal with the media much, right, over the course of just that entire run with the Patriots. Then he joins the media in sort of that year after, and he's
Yeah.
constantly on the Manning cast with those two and trying to get a new image. I think he was on McAfee as well. Like he's on all of these shows that you're like, why would Bill ever be doing these things? Because he's trying to repair his image. And then obviously this has been a really uncharacteristic element of all of this. So it's funny you brought up Uncanny Valley. I think of Uncanny Valley when it comes to just like this whole experience, because being so tight-lipped and not giving really the media anything, and then now to have all of this, ammo in a sense too with what has gone on there. It's been really odd, but I don't necessarily think it takes away from what he did in the NFL. Like
I agree.
I was listening to I listened to a lot of the Bill Simmons brought this up on a podcast recently. Like we don't think about the end of eras for like Jordan finishing with the Wizards, or Lombardi finishing, I believe it was the Redskins at the time. Like we don't think about these final chapters once 10, 20, 30 years have gone by. We just think about the prime years. Could this one be different? I don't know. But as like I said before, everyone's attention spans are even shorter. So we'll probably block out that this even happened in the first place too. So I don't think it tarnishes his legacy. Don't get me wrong. It's super, super weird just to see the reports and to see, I don't know, just the aesthetic of it all, like the practices and like her involvement down there. It's like, what in the world is going on? But at the end of the day, like he's etched his place in NFL history. So even though this is truly like the weirdest way to go out, which is likely be his final time out, just gotta. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but you got to hold on to the memories.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that it would simply be viewed as a failed experiment if not for the soap opera element that's come with all of it. And you can take the girlfriend, make it a part of it, or the fact that like they were working on a documentary about the season that's now been canceled, which you talk about the behind the scenes stuff. Like that's what I want to see. Like,
right.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's why I speak to. There's so much more we don't know, because they would. I mean, they don't want anything probably getting out with that. If there's probably some stuff in there that's not great whatsoever. And so if that were to come, the fact that they pulled the plug on that tells you a lot.
Yeah. And I guarantee at some point, 4 or 5 years down the road, some guys, this footage is on somebody's laptop somewhere, and we're going to get an uncut version of it at some point in the future once people have kind of forgotten about this. But
like The Last Dance, they were just sitting on
exactly.
And then they put it together, and we're like, "Where's all this footage?" It was like Rodman's in Vegas, like and nobody just had this before this moment. It's insane.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think that Belichick's like. One of his greatest strengths has kind of become a weakness in the sense that like he's very petty, and he's very, he cares like we all do about our own image. Our own image and our own legacy. And I think that there was this element of him, and maybe he won't admit it, I don't know, that felt like I have to, in order to firmly etch my name, despite being a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach, I got to do something beyond having Tom Brady at my hip. And like you said, I'm with you. Like it was a marriage. There's 20 years like that of unprecedented success doesn't happen on accident. There's a lot of pieces that need to be moving in the right direction. And he was obviously a big part of that. My whole thing was just, I think it's a really tough commitment in any capacity, regardless of the past success, what have you, to bring in a 72-year-old coach to run a college football program, because college football coaches are brought in normally as long-term guys. You want guys who are going to develop players, who are going to recruit players, who can promise, hey, I'm going to be here the entire time that you're here. And I mean, even if he had great success, we're talking probably 5-10 years at the most of him, coaching there. That was the move that I was like, I'm not really sure. Now your last gig before this, am I correct? It was in Vegas?
It was, the last 3 years I was in Vegas, which, it was great. People are like, what was it like living in Vegas? Because I had to obviously commute. Our station was on the Strip, and it gave me some of the greatest memories I'll have covering this job. I got to cover a Super Bowl, which was incredible and a childhood dream. But it's also as insane as you would think it is too. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I would say even in the time you were there, because you were there 22, I think they're 25. I feel like as a sports city, it's expanded so much, because there were my entire lifetime, there's been this, I'm not going to say it's a fever dream because it's come true, but there's been this idea of like, there's an untapped market there in terms of sports and growth in Las Vegas, and they didn't have teams for the longest time. And Golden Knights come in, and now you've added, football, and you've played a Super Bowl there. And I've had this theory for the longest time that like sports fandom and the heartbreak of sports, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, hits a lot harder on this side of the country. I think weather has something to do with that. Like I worked at a gas station for 2 years before I, kind of popped off with the content stuff. And like when, if the Lions lose a playoff game and the next day it's 10 degrees outside and it's snowing and people are coming in and buying their coffee and their cigarettes and they just look miserable, there's no other outlet. Like it's just, you kind of got to stew in it. Whereas like it's a little bit, and it's not to discredit, but like, the Dodgers lose a playoff series, you wake up at 75. Like it's just a little bit easier. I know
exactly what you're talking about. And it's also because I grew up in South Florida, so I've seen, and I feel like that's why I've moved around a lot in this job and had a lot of different experiences. I feel very grateful for that because I've seen a lot of different why fan bases are the way that they are or why they do. Like a great example is like, if you're in Miami, why would you, and people always got on fans for showing up like after the first quarter to Heat games. Why would you not? It's like the most beautiful weather and South Beach and like some of the most, and I've conflicting opinions on Miami, but it is aesthetically beautiful. Like I don't blame these people for not being sometimes fully invested because it's like, oh, our team lost. There are still hundreds of other things you could do. When you're in the January, February, March months in some of these cities, there is nothing else you can do besides just reflect on how great or awful the night was before. And I think that's at least what being a Boston sports fan kind of gave me, that because there's a certain tenor, like there's a self-deprecation and there's a, just a passion that also goes with that, because you're like, you see the tweets where it's like, my mental health is dictated by this team, like over the course of the next 5 months. Like that's guilty in some of those cities. It's real in a lot of these other ones, especially the Northeast. And that goes back to sort of my attraction for the job. It's like, you want to be in a place where people care that much. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes fans take it to a different extent where it's like, okay, you've been in the house too long and you've been having cabin fever for a minute because you're having these, you're saying all sorts of out-of-pocket things. But at its core, the people who live it, and there's generations of it and have heard stories from parents, grandparents, like that's why we love this at the end of the day. That's why you see even the other side, like you see Mariners fans crying in the stands even when they walk it off. I know it's not the memory that Tigers fans won't have with it, but that's what made that series so interesting, is because you had two fan bases that in a lot of ways sort of mirrored each other and sort of knew what the other one was going through emotionally at the same time. And let's be honest, if the Dodgers get walked off like that, there's a high chance you're still going to get a breakfast burrito tomorrow and everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, no, it hits different. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think especially, look, it's like this with all sports. Baseball, there's an even greater like family sense, just because there's a familiarity with seeing these players, the reporters, the broadcasters every single day. I mean, there's like a comfort food element to it where you genuinely feel like you get to know people. And it's like, I mean, I don't want to, dive into what this offseason might look like for the Tigers, because I don't want to depress people, but somebody like a Tarek Skubal, right, is a guy who, I mean, we were streaming his minor league starts when the Tigers were a 114 loss team just because we were looking forward to seeing him pitch. And then that guy develops into Cy Young winner and multi-time All-Star, starting the All-Star game. It's like there's a sense of, we feel like we've gotten to know these guys like they're one of ours, that connects, I think, a lot more in the in the Midwest, kind of East Coast. One other gig that I want to just highlight, just because it is a part of the country that I've been to once, and I'll just leave it at that. But you spent some time in Louisiana, in Lafayette. Have you, during your time there, were you able to, I would say experience is probably the proper word to do with this, parties at LSU, or were you strictly professional at that point in your career?
Strictly professional. I'm honestly glad I was dude, some of those college towns, my God, like they just take it to it. Like, and that was the funny thing too. So Lafayette was an hour away from Baton Rouge. So it's always, and especially being in local news, like when you're assigned to, an LSU game or something like that and traveling out there, there's 9 times out of 10, you're by yourself, you're your own cameraman, you're your own editor, and you're doing all these things alone. And so say there's a night game at LSU and it finishes up like, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You're getting done with the press conferences, you're shooting your own stuff, like your own stand-ups and everything, and then you're driving back. There was so many times, and that's why honestly the grind of this industry, you get a lot of people that are like, hey, I love sports a lot, but this is just, it's too much, and it asks so much of you. You're leaving those games. I remember specifically because my job after that, when I covered South Carolina and Clemson, and we're driving 3.5 hours to Clemson from where I was in Charleston, South Carolina. Dabo Sweeney's kissing babies and signing autographs for 2 hours after the game on a night game.
Yeah.
And there were times we didn't get back until 5 or 6 in the morning, just because of those drives and how long it takes. And it really, you can see why it's more than a sport to a lot of people down there. But in terms of what they ask coverage wise, like, I can't tell you the amount of times, and it really is like this industry. It's a lot of people, like, having a social life and working those weekends is really, really difficult. So, but it makes you kind of check in with yourself to be like, do I still love this job, as much as I did when I was a kid? And that answer has always been a resounding yes. So I quite literally could not find the time to go out after those games too, especially in that area. But it's funny because my brother still lived in New Orleans, so I would travel a lot from Lafayette to New Orleans, which is about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And New Orleans is a city I have very fond memories with. It's on my top 3 probably in the U.S. I love it so much.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and that's, I would say, and I don't know, there's someone, that's an area too, if we're going to do expansion, I think would be great for baseball. That, like, if we're going to, I think that and Nashville, I feel like, are the 2 most likely, potential.
And it's crazy. The LSU baseball games are some of the most, like, if you're probably thinking like very, very random. Those environments are some of the greatest sports environments with how loud that place gets. And so you would think like, oh, it's the South, how would a team work here? Like, those are college-like atmospheres. It's almost like, it's very similar to me as like Oklahoma City when it comes to the Thunder. People were like, how is this going to flourish here? It's a thing. And now it's one of the best home courts in the sport. And so sometimes, because there's not as much like history there with it, we think like, how would that possibly survive? Like, it is truly a great sports area. And it's actually funny because there was a thing that they would say a lot, because I think it was, what was it? Like either the education or something like that ranked like second to last in states in the US. And they'd be like, yeah, we're like last in that, but we're number 1 in quality of life. And that's because just everything's a party down there. And, it's a place that there's a lot of memories for sure. Mardi Gras is fun, but there was smells that I have smelled that I didn't even know were humanly possible over the course of those streets and alleys. So it's a gift.
Yeah,
truly vile, like vomit-inducing.
Yeah, I was going to say they probably weren't humanly possible, to be completely honest with you. But no, it's interesting you bring that up. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that because I through a very strange but very fun series of circumstances with my last employer, I went to Omaha twice for the College World Series and ended up basically bandwagoning my way onto the Ole Miss bandwagon in 2022 when they won. They won the entire thing there, and because the coworker I had at the time was an Ole Miss grad. And you realize 2 things. One, you just kind of mentioned, like, Southern hospitality is a real thing. Everyone there's just nice. It's just like they're just so cool. They just talk to you. They chat it up with you. Like, they're hey, welcome aboard. Oh, yeah, you want to come get a drink with us? You want to come eat with us? You're welcome to. And 2 is the most underrated sports, like untapped sports potential, I would say, in the world. It's gotten better. Is how fun college baseball games are, and the fact that like it's totally a different environment. And you're right, it is almost like a college football atmosphere in terms of what the individuality that fans bring to the game. It's a ton of fun. Yeah,
and they also, the great part is nobody like in the Northeast, and I take a lot of pride in this. Like when I went to college, I always tell this, like the amount of times somebody's told me to F off at a Dunkin' or something at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. Like I wear it as like it's almost like a passing of the torch. It's like a term, like if you're not being told one, like you're not truly in the thick of it. In the South, they don't tell you that. They just say, bless your heart. So they even when they tell you to F off, they're like, they do it in a courteous way.
Yeah.
A gentlemanly way.
But as friendly as it can be. Yeah. And obviously I want to finish here by talking about, We mentioned it at the beginning, but you kind of being, brought into this role during the heart of the season. And I knew that there were rumors about them kind of looking for somebody. And then, you pop up on the air really around July. I guess, obviously, you're enthusiastic about the job. You take the job. Was there concern on your level about the amount of catch up you felt like you needed to do? Because I feel like it's kind of like showing up to school when the exam is 2 weeks away. It's like, it's not impossible, but there's a lot that you kind of need to learn. Or did you feel like you had a pretty good, like, surface level knowledge of what you were getting into?
I would say definitely a good surface level knowledge. I think when your life is sports, and there's some times where I'm like, damn, I got to really unplug from this because it's like every single second of what I'm doing. And just, following the teams and doing all of that. So I very much had like a surface level knowledge of it. At the same time, I think it goes back to, like, I wouldn't say catching up, but I don't know. I've always had like my eyes on like a place like this. And like I mentioned before, sort of a place that cares. And I think the biggest thing is talking with like the people that I talked with over the course of being interested in this, like thought a very similar way that I did and sort of brought a similar energy to it at the same time that I did too. And so I don't necessarily know if catching up is the right term, but I wanted to do it justice because I know how many amazing broadcasters there's been over the course of this. I know who has done this recently, and I would say just the pressure that I place on myself is a lot more of it. Like it's really funny because in this industry, sometimes you can't go to the Reddit threads, the comment section, because it's
Yes.
It's just it's society now, but it's so funny to me because when you do see those in a lot of ways, like sometimes the conversations that you have with yourself and how you like those comments don't even do justice to conversations that the way that you're thinking about yourself and the pressure that you place on yourself is already. And I think more than anything, it's just wanting to do it right, because like you talked about before, people grow up with these broadcasters. They really resonate. They spend time with them. They feel like they know them. And so in a lot of ways, it's wanting to give that the proper attention and just sort of just to do it justice over the course of that. And I think that that's been the thing that I got in my head a lot about early on in this job is like, man, there's been some really incredible people to do this. And what I keep going back to is like, hey, they brought you here for a reason. And I think I've just been awestruck by the people that I've worked around, because between Jason, Andy, Daniela, all of these people, it's truly the first time in my career that you just sort of look around and you're like, man, you're really good at this.
Yeah.
Like, you're incredible at this. And it's super humbling to be a part of that. And it just makes you want to be better too. So it's why the job is so much fun, is because it's not just a team atmosphere, but it's like, man, I genuinely feel like we're making each other better. And so even the simple things, man, when it's like rain delay questions or, somebody coming up to the booth and mentioning something that you brought up over the course of a game that you didn't even think about twice, when you went to bed that night, it's like to have people with that level of care and dedication towards, you talking about a sport. I don't know. It's really powerful. And I think a lot of the things that I have gone through mentally was just being like, man, I hope people like it, because they really, really care here at the same time too. And so more than anything, I would say that's sort of the thing that I've thought the most about. So, the knowledge of the teams and getting to know these, and truly, like, even the Tigers clubhouse, like, those guys could not be more down to earth and could not welcome a conversation even more. Like, you even talk about how accomplished Tarek is. Like, he genuinely is just one of the dudes. Like, he will chop it up with you about anything. And that's not a thing in every single sport. It's not a thing with every single athlete, especially ones who have accomplished so much. So they're just people at the end of the day, man. And I think that that's something that I've really resonated with at the same time, because like this job and this industry is about relationships. And it's been a very short amount of time that I've been here, but I can tell that this is a really special place in terms of what those relationships bring to your life. I don't know if that answers your question or if it's just a long talk.
It does. No, and I honestly, you're mirroring a lot of sentiments that me and many other members of this fan base have had for a long time, which is I think that Scott Harris is very much a baseball purist. And I think one of the things that he was focused on when he arrived here was like improving the game day experience. And that includes both watching in person and watching at home. And the fact that like you add Benetti, you put Dirks into a greater role. Danielle has been around this area forever, but she was, she's done now kind of, thrust in the middle of it. You're here. It's like, the communal experience has become so much fun. And yeah, I mean, you never know. And it varies amongst different organizations. It varies amongst organizations in this state, in the city of Detroit, where you never know how accessible they're going to be. There's been times where this has been an organization that's a lot more tight-lipped. There's been times where they've been willing to play ball a little bit more than others. I mean, I think that there's a individuality to this particular group in this clubhouse that I find very fun. I mean, like Tarek, I'm always going to be indebted to. The second episode of this show ever was Tarek Skubal. So like, I appreciate the fact that like, he's given, he gives people the time of day, and AJ's obviously the man. And no, I'm often wrong with my predictions, but one of the predictions I've gotten very right was I said the day Jason Benetti was brought on here, this guy's going to be worshipped by this fan base. Just because I remember watching him in Chicago and seeing him do football and basketball for ESPN and Fox. It's like this guy he's locked in, and I would say Detroit. Again, trying to remove my fandom from the equation, I don't know if there's a city that has a better string of broadcasters historically than Detroit has. I mean, whether it's Dickerson,
that's
Benetti,
a lot of it too.
Yeah, no, we take that stuff very seriously, and so it's been a joy to kind of see it grow, man. But no, look, I appreciate you doing this. It's nice to network here. Not an easy thing that you've been asked to do, to kind of come in here in the heart of a very emotional time for this fan base. But we're going to continue to follow what you do with Red Wings and Pistons stuff, and you're one of ours now, and we appreciate it. So thanks for all the work that you've put on, and obviously appreciate the heck out of you coming on here and talking shop with me for the last hour or so.
Of course, man. I'm here to be everybody's broadcaster, therapist, all of it. It's just the whole emotional ride of it all. It's funny because especially after that, how just the amount of emotional investment from that game the other night, it was heartbreaking, but in a lot of ways, this is going to sound weird, it was really cool to have kind of like that old school, everyone's watching the game, tweeting every 2 minutes sort of experience, because that's very different than how it used to be. And that was super enlightening for me to just sort of like see the ride. Because it's one thing to see that in the regular season, right? You get a grasp for how much people care. It's a whole different monster, when you have some of those brutal finishes or brutal exits like that. So I very much feel for people on that front. And just to add one more thing, even you talked about Benetti a second ago, and this is everybody on the broadcast, and I shouldn't leave out Johnny Kane, because Johnny is honestly,
of course, he's the man.
Truly one of the nicest guys, and taught me so much early on about this. And I think he's such a great example of how that authenticity shines through, because he's just one of the first days he couldn't pronounce it for the life of him. And I've had many of these days, familiarity on air. And it's just like bringing it back up multiple times over the course of if I could say, and it's just, people don't want you to be perfect. They just want you to, to be yourself. And I think that he's such a great testament to that. Jason is such a great testament to that. His brain, and he's going to probably get super uncomfortable if he ever hears any of these compliments for him, because he genuinely is like, please stop say this to me right now. But what you guys see on air is one thing. His brain just works in such a different way, man.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it's true. The little things, I'm like, it's genuinely impressive when you witness it on a day-to-day basis of how in the world did you put those two into, and it's just and it takes you a second sometimes to the references and everything. And it's man, it's just, but it's cool to be around. And I've been very lucky that a lot of people have come up and been expressed how they feel about things, and been grateful for welcoming me, because that's, for a guy in a city where I didn't know anybody. And don't get me wrong, it's been a big life change, because I've moved around. I had 4 different jobs at local news before coming here. And so I've moved, 6 times since pretty much I started college back in 2013. So it's always tough getting to an area and, not knowing anybody. And I think this city has made that transition really seamless. And so for that, I'll be eternally grateful.
For sure, man. Yeah, no, I remember there was a Benetti made a Jose Miranda was playing for the Twins, and he made a Jose Miranda, Lin-Manuel Miranda Hamilton reference crossover. and I was wondering, I'm like, I don't know how many of these people are going to get that, but I'm like the lengths,
exactly.
the bridge that he had to cross to connect those two seamlessly. I'm like, that is brilliant. So yeah, man,
he will always take that bridge, man. He will always,
yeah, for sure.
He will always establish that bridge. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, greatly appreciate you, dude, and best of luck here in the city of Detroit.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, I expected he'd be really good, and he was. Man, for a guy who's, we're around the same age. This is where, I'm 30, but sometimes I just feel like a child because this guy's been around, he's traveled, he's lived, and good for him, man. He's a pro's pro, and look forward to seeing him here in Detroit for a long time. It's one of those things that once you're here, if you get indoctrinated at all, I feel like you stay for quite a while. And I think that's been the case with many pieces here. And I think that especially with the baseball crew, like between Benetti and Daniela and Andy Dirks and Petrie, like they all feel like Detroiters now. And a lot of them are, Michigan-based people and have been even before they got those jobs. So it's all part of the family experience. But even with the Tiger season being over, you can see him all over FanDuel covering Wing stuff as well this year. He's going to be a key part of this. And seems like an awesome dude. Really appreciate him taking the time to jump on here and then be an interview subject for Chris and company. That will do it for today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. We are on TikTok as well. Let's get the following up there. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. We are available in Apple form. We are available in Apple form. If we were all to be anthropomorphized as fruits, we would be apples. No, we are available in audio form on Apple Podcasts. We are available in audio form on Spotify. And of course, CastellaniContent.com is being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I are creating. And of course, shout out to my friend and producer, Austin Sisler, who just does a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job. I appreciate all your support. Appreciate Logan. We will be back next week with another episode as the train continues to roll on. We are, and we're a ways away from this. Because we got a lot of football still to be played and a lot of stuff to talk about. I just want to say, if there's anyone wondering about our schedule, we're going to play it out the way that we did last year. We will take a break right around holiday time. So we got probably, 10 more weeks, 12 more weeks of good content, whether it be interviews, podcasts and stuff. And then we're going to take a little bit of time off and enjoy ourselves. But until then, we continue to march forward. Appreciate your continual support. I love the heck out of all you guys, and I will see you again real soon. Appreciate Logan Reever. Talk to y'all again. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.